Good morning. Today is Monday, February 13th, 2023. One of the most famous and misunderstood passages in the Torah is in this week's Torah portion, the Parsha Mishpatim. Ayin tachas ayin. If one person injures another and causes the other to lose their eye, then the person who did that crime, their eye is put out. And the same thing for their tooth, their hand, their foot, etc. Whatever a person does to injure or harm another person, that exact action is done to them. Ayin tachas ayin. It's a very strict, some would say barbaric punishment for the crime of assault. We insist that the Torah that we have from God is in two parts. Torah Shebiksav, the written law, the 5 books of Moshe, and Torah Shebal Peh, the oral explanation of the written law that God gave to Moshe as God commanded Moshe what to write in the written law. So both are given by God through Moshe to the Jewish people. God would say to Moshe on the top of Mount Sinai, write these words down. And then God would say, and Moshe, I want to explain to you how I mean for them to be understood. In some cases, the explanation is contradictory to the words that are actually written. So, in this example, the written words say, if a person puts out another person's eye, the criminal, their eye should be put out. The Baal Peh, the oral law says, Moshe, God says, what I mean for you to do is, I mean for this person to be required by the Jewish court to pay a financial penalty, mammon. We reject what many others assert, that the Torah Shebiksav, the written law, is harsh, divine, and later it was softened by more humane rabbis in their interpretation. So the written law says ayin tachas ayin, and later rabbis came along and said, let's not be so harsh, let's be more humane, let's allow for a monetary punishment. That's the way many other people understand this. We reject that, and we insist that both come directly from God at Sinai through Moshe to the Jewish people. Well, if that's the case, why are there two versions of which punishment to give for the crime for assault? Which is it? Why write down one punishment in the written law and then explain a different punishment in the oral law? And the answer is because by doing it this way, God is teaching us two lessons. A lesson by writing it this way, ayin tachas ayin, and a lesson in explaining this is what actually should happen, mammon. The second, what is included in the oral law, is what a court should do, how we should judge, and how we punish someone for a crime of assault. The first, written in the written law, ayin tachas ayin, is to teach us an idea. And the idea is crucial. I learned this from my friend Abe Mezrich. When you injure someone else, the legal punishment that a Jewish court will impose is mammon, a financial penalty. And that is to compensate for the loss of money to the victim, for the medical bills, for the loss of wages, if the person is not able to work for a certain amount of time. If it's a more serious, long-lasting injury, for reduced earning power going forward, and other aspects of the monetary loss that this injury causes. And part of your penalty is not only healing the person you hurt, but also healing yourself for the crime you committed. And to do that, the Torah says, you need to feel their pain. All too often, disassociating ourselves from another's pain is what allows us to hurt them. Just to take extreme examples, anti-Semitic violence, or racial violence, or violent hate crimes are often preceded by cartoons, or images, or rhetoric that dehumanize the other. Because if they are somehow less human than me, therefore, causing them pain is somehow okay. It is a sick and twisted logic. But tragically, it is very enduring logic. If you hurt someone, God's message is, the court will require you to pay for their complete healing. And the message also is, read the words as they are written in the Torah, ayin tachas ayin. We're not going to do this to you, but you should think about what it would feel like if this were done to you. If you, God forbid, put out someone's eye, you should think about what would it feel like if someone put out your eye. What would you feel? What would it do to you? The message of the written words is to work on yourself to feel the pain of others, that along with the financial penalty is what justice requires in order for society to be healed. So here's a story I want to share with you from Rabbi Yisachar Frand. It communicates this message, though the story he tells is in the context of another mitzvah in this week's Torah portion. The Torah says, Kol almana v'yasom lo sanun. A person who is a widow, a person who is an orphan, do not oppress them. Don't bother them. Don't upset them. Their pain is acute. We have to be particularly careful not to cause any additional pain. They suffer. Kol almana v'yasam lo sanun. Do not oppress anyone who is a widow or an orphan. So Rabbi Yisachar Frand tells the following story. There's a very great scholar, Torah scholar, in the 1800s, and his name was Rabbi Aharon Bakst. Now, it is probable that you have never heard his name. I will confess to you, before reading this story, I had never heard his name, but he was a very, very great scholar. And the reason that you have not heard his name, probably, is because he could have been, within the Jewish scholarly world, a household name, but he chose not to be. And the story goes like this. In the 1800s in Europe, there was a very wealthy Jewish man named Rabbi Shraga Feivel Frank. He was a businessman, he owned factories, he was very, very wealthy. He had a number of children, he had a number of daughters, and his sons-in-law were great, great Torah scholars. That's what he wanted to do with his wealth. He wanted to attract to his family the greatest Torah scholars that he could. That was his value. That was his priority. And so he encouraged his daughters to meet and to marry men with outstanding scholarly ability. And among his sons-in-law were some of the greatest scholars in all of European Jewry. When he died, his widow, his wife, they had 3 unmarried daughters. And he left in his will a very sizable amount of money to be used as dowries, with the proviso that his daughters would marry 3 great Torah scholars, each one a great Torah scholar, just like their older sisters already had done. He wanted to make sure after his life that his wife continued this, and she insisted that his daughters would marry great Torah scholars. Daughter number 1 married Rabbi Isser Zalman Meltzer. He became the leader, the greatest scholar of European Jewry of his time. Clearly a winner. Daughter number 2 married Rabbi Baruch Horowitz, another well-known great teacher and scholar in Israel. A clear winner. Daughter number 3 became engaged to Rabbi Aharon Bakst, who was a young, promising scholar. One day, the engaged couple were spending time together, and Rabbi Bakst said to his fiancée, he said, "I know that your father had factories. He was a successful businessman. I would like to see his factory. Would you take me on a tour of his factory?" Okay. When the future mother-in-law heard about how they had spent their time together, she was very upset. This is the person that I was told is such a great Torah scholar. He wants to go tour factories? What, he wants to be a businessman? Did I go through all this to have son-in-law who's going to be a businessman? My husband didn't want this. I don't want this. I want a son-in-law who's going to be a great Torah scholar, not somebody who's interested in touring factories. Just in parentheses, you have to imagine to yourself what would make you upset if your daughter and her fiancé were to do spending time together on an afternoon. Okay, fine. But this is what upset this widow, this woman. And she said to him, "I want Torah scholars. I don't want businessmen." And she called off the engagement. She called off the engagement, and in fact, this daughter married Rabbi Moshe Mordechai Epstein, who became the Rosh HaYeshiva of the Slobodka Yeshiva. Slobodka Yeshiva was the greatest, most renowned academy of higher Jewish learning in Lithuanian Europe in the mid to late 1800s. And its head, the famous Rabbi Moshe Mordechai Epstein, was the third last son-in-law. All right. Rab Bakst went back to Slobodka, where he also lived. And he became a truly great scholar. And he was admired by his scholarship, by his personality traits, by everyone who knew him. When the position of Rosh HaYeshiva of the Slobodka Yeshiva came open, they didn't ask Rabbi Epstein first. They asked Rabbi Bakst first. He was offered the position. Now you need to understand, within the world of the highest level of Torah scholarship in Eastern Europe in the 1800s, being the head of the Slobodka Yeshiva, that's the top position that there is. That's the premier position. Rabbi Bakst declined. They asked him a second time to take the offer, and he refused. And they asked him a third time, and he declined again. And finally, they said to him, "Why in the world would you not want this prestigious position? This is the greatest position that exists in the Torah world today. Why would you not want to become the Rosh Yeshiva, the head of the Slobodka Yeshiva? And here's the answer Rabbi Bakst gave. If I become the Rosh Yeshiva, and I become well known as a Torah scholar, that widow will realize that she made the biggest mistake of her life. She could have had the Rosh HaYeshiva of the Slobodka Yeshiva as her son-in-law, but she broke the engagement because she thought that I was more interested in business than in Torah scholarship, which was not true at the time. I just was interested to see the factory. But she would feel so terrible that she had this shidduch for her daughter and she broke it. And it's all her fault, and she would feel terrible. And I, Rabbi Bakst said, I don't want to hurt her feelings. I don't want to do that to a widow. And therefore, no matter what it means for me personally, I declined the position. Once he declined, the position was offered to and accepted by Rabbi Moshe Mordechai Epstein, who did become a household name in the Torah world, and who was the youngest son-in-law of this widow. God insists in our Torah portion that justice requires you cannot hurt someone else without feeling their pain. That's why what is actually a financial penalty in court is described in the written Torah as ayin tachas ayin, an eye for an eye, because of the requirement that you feel the pain that you have caused another to suffer. My friends, I want to wish you a great day, and I look forward to seeing you soon in person.